And welcome back to the Rowdy Studios, Bass Masters and Bass Cutler with Jeff Owens of SceneDaily.com. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Now, Jeff is the editor.
He's the editor.
He's the head hunch.
Don't know about that.
The top dog.
He's some kind of hunch.
I'm some kind. I don't know what.
Which means, Jeff, that Clint Bowyer is mad at you and your ilk for messing around with his contract negotiations. Let's listen.
You know, unfortunately, the media gets a hold of it, and it makes it even worse, you know, with speculation, guesses, and you guys need to stop and think. But when it starts, you know, showing detriment to a situation one way or another, I think it's a problem.
So I think this is an interesting point. Media speculating about contracts and talking about contracts while they're in process. And what's the obligation of the media not to hurt the parties involved in the contract?
Well, first of all, it's a very valid topic for us to cover because fans want to know when a driver's in the middle of contract negotiations and, you know, he's considering whether to stay at his team or go somewhere else, particularly when it's a prominent team like Richard Childress Racing. That's news, and fans want to know what's going on, and they want to be updated regularly on that subject. And sometimes you want to, you know, you find out things about what's in the contract, what they're asking for, what the sticking points are. And I think it's okay to report that stuff because fans want to know, but you got to be very careful with it. But the idea of talking about these contracts and whether a guy is worth what he's asking for and whether he should stay there, whether Childress should re-sign him or he should go somewhere else, all of that's fair game. That's our jobs as journalists to not only report those things, but to commentate on them and to give an opinion and some perspective and analysis on it. That's what fans expect from us as journalists. That doesn't always set well with the drivers. They don't like that stuff because they think it hurts their negotiations.
Right.
It's an interesting thing you brought up, this balancing act that a journalist has to employ in terms of maintaining their relationship with the person they're covering so that they can get information and have access, but not allowing that relationship to cloud what they write. That must be a really difficult.
It is, and you always have to walk a fine line there. You can't get too close to these guys, and you can't lose your objectivity. That's a big, big problem in the business of journalism if you let that happen. But, you know, you want to keep the relationship professional. You know, you don't want to become good friends with these guys to the point where it impacts what you can and cannot write. But you want to be objective, you want to be professional, and you want them to view you that way. You want them to talk to you, and they know that you're not going to burn them on something, but you also, they also want to be able to trust you and know that what you're going to write is going to be accurate. You know, if you're constantly writing things that are wrong or cross the line or maybe unfair, then you're going to damage that relationship not only with them, but your own credibility as a journalist.
Well, that's the other balancing act, too, between being first about something and being right about something.
Right, yeah. Some go out on a limb just to be first, just to get the scoop, and sometimes it's not right.
I know this varies from media outlet to media outlet, but let's just say for SceneDaily.com, if Bob Pockrass or Kenny Bruce comes to you and they say, we just heard that Carl Edwards is demanding a 150-foot yacht from Jack Roush, what do you require of them before you'll go public with such a story?
Well, first of all, we have to know where the information came from, and we have to know that it came from a very, very reliable source, a source that we feel like we can trust.
So even if it's an anonymous source, they need to tell you who it was?
Most of the time, yes. I mean, I trust those guys because they've been doing this a long time, and if I didn't, they wouldn't be working for us.
So their reputation isn't just with their readership; it's with
absolutely. They've built the reputation of being professionals and being credible and being right most of the time.
You know they're not going to just go with something.
Exactly. So I have to trust those guys, but when it comes down to something like that, you know, you have to sit down and talk about it, and you have to find out where the information came from, and we have to be as close to certain as we possibly can that the information is correct.
What about checking with the person that's the subject? Where does that fall into the hierarchy? So, for example, Carl Edwards wants a yacht. We're not saying he wants a yacht. It's a hypothetical example. At what point do you feel like I'm obligated to call Carl Edwards and say, hey, I'm reporting this?
Absolutely. I think that's part of the process.
It seems like that's what gets the drivers upset.
Do you ever have a guy say, please don't report that?
Oh, sure, you have that. And then you have to weigh, you know, the positive and negatives of that. I mean, if it's good information, and it depends on how important it is. You know, is it really that important to the story? And is it worth the risk to report this? How, it just depends on what it is. If it's something like that, a small tidbit in the contract, it may not be worth it. It just depends on what the information is. But yeah, I mean, when you get information like that, I think part of your responsibility is to go to the source and say, hey, we heard this, we found out this. Can you comment on this? Can you tell us about this? A lot of times they'll say, no, I can't talk to you about that. And they might say, hey, I'd rather you not report that. And then you have to make a judgment call on whether it's worth it or not. How newsworthy is this piece of information in the story you're covering? And that's a judgment call you have to make as a professional journalist.
Well, there you go. A lot to think about, a lot to talk about when it comes to reporting on NASCAR and contracts. Thanks, Clint Bowyer, for that thought-provoking statement. And we'll be back next time right here from the Rowdy Studios.
Rowdy.com. Say it like it is.
Say what like it is?
Rowdy.com.